The award ceremony in Los Angeles was buzzing with excitement. It was one of those nights where the biggest names in Hollywood gathered under one roof, dressed in their finest suits and gowns. Cameras flashed endlessly as celebrities walked down the red carpet, waving and smiling for the crowd. Among them were Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro, two legends whose careers had spanned decades. They were both there to support different films, but hadn't crossed paths since a disagreement years ago that left bad blood between them. Clint Eastwood, known for his calm yet commanding presence, sat near the front of the auditorium. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the glitz and glamour without showing much emotion. He wasn't one for small talk or unnecessary drama, preferring instead to keep to himself unless absolutely necessary. Beside him was Alan Brooks, an old friend, who had been by Clint's side through thick and thin. Alan knew Clint well enough to sense when something or someone was bothering him, and tonight he could tell Clint seemed unusually tense. A few rows back, Robert De Niro sat with his assistant, Lisa Carter. De Niro, on the other hand, was more animated, chatting quietly with those around him while keeping a watchful eye on the stage. Though he appeared relaxed, Lisa noticed a flicker of irritation cross his face whenever Clint's name was mentioned during the program. She had worked with De Niro long enough to know that beneath his composed exterior lay a fiery temper, especially when it came to matters of pride and respect. As the ceremony progressed, neither man paid much attention to the speeches or performances. Their minds were elsewhere, replaying memories of the failed collaboration they'd once attempted. It was supposed to be a groundbreaking project, a gritty crime drama titled Shadows of Justice. The idea excited everyone involved at first, but things quickly turned sour. Creative differences became power struggles, and egos clashed until the project fell apart entirely. No one publicly spoke about what happened, but whispers circulated in Hollywood circles for years afterward. After the main event concluded, guests began moving toward the backstage area for a private reception. That's where fate intervened. As Clint made his way through the crowded hallway, he found himself standing just feet away from De Niro. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Both men locked eyes briefly before looking away, pretending not to notice each other. But the tension in the air was palpable. Nearby, Jennifer Miller, a journalist covering the event for a popular entertainment magazine, couldn't help but overhear fragments of their conversation. At first, it sounded like harmless banter, the kind of playful ribbing you'd expect between seasoned professionals. But then the tone shifted. What started as a casual remark about artistic integrity soon escalated into a heated argument. "You always thought your way was the only way," De Niro said, his voice low but laced with anger. "That's why nothing ever got done." Clint's jaw tightened. "And you never understood the importance of letting go sometimes. Perfection isn't everything." Their words grew sharper, drawing curious glances from others nearby. Some people tried to intervene, sensing trouble brewing, but neither Clint nor De Niro backed down. Alan stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Clint's shoulder, but even he couldn't calm the rising storm. Lisa hovered anxiously behind De Niro, unsure of what to do. She knew her boss well enough to realize he wouldn't stop until he had the last word. And sure enough, De Niro leaned in slightly, his expression hardening. "Maybe if you'd listened more, we wouldn't be standing here today." That comment struck a nerve. Clint's patience snapped. Without saying another word, he grabbed De Niro firmly by the arm and began steering him toward the exit. Onlookers gasped in shock as Clint practically dragged De Niro out of the room, leaving stunned silence in their wake. Jennifer watched the entire scene unfold, her pen poised over her notebook. She scribbled furiously, capturing every detail she could remember. This was gold, a story that would dominate headlines for days, maybe even weeks. Her heart raced with excitement as she realized she might have stumbled upon the scoop of a lifetime. Back inside, whispers erupted among the attendees. Some defended Clint, arguing that he was justified given De Niro's apparent aggression. Others sided with De Niro, accusing Clint of being unnecessarily forceful. Opinions flew back and forth, but one thing was clear. This incident wasn't going to be forgotten anytime soon. Alan followed Clint outside, concern etched across his face. Was that really necessary? He asked cautiously. Clint exhaled sharply, running a hand through his silver hair. I didn't come here to argue with him, Alan, but he pushes buttons, you know? Always has. Inside, Lisa tried to console Niro, who looked both furious and embarrassed. We'll handle this, she assured him, though privately she wondered how they could possibly spin such a public spectacle in their favor. Meanwhile, Jennifer slipped away unnoticed, eager to start piecing together the full story. She already had a list of people to interview, friends, colleagues, and industry, insiders who might shed light on the deep-seated rivalry between these two giants of cinema. Little did she know her investigation would uncover far more than just the events of that evening. For now, however, the world was left reeling from the dramatic clash between Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro, a moment that would go down in Hollywood history. The moment Clint Eastwood removed Robert De Niro from the backstage area, it felt like the entire world stopped. People whispered among themselves, trying to piece together what had just happened. Cameras clicked furiously as journalists scrambled to capture any detail they could. By the time Clint disappeared from sight, the story was already spreading faster than wildfire. Social media lit up with videos and photos of the heated exchange, each post adding fuel to the growing controversy. Jennifer Miller didn't waste a second. She knew this was the kind of story that could make or break her career. With her notebook in hand, she began weaving through the crowd, approaching anyone who might have witnessed the clash. Some were eager to share their thoughts, while others hesitated, unsure of how much they should say. But Jennifer was persistent, asking questions that probed deeper than surface-level gossip. Her goal wasn't just to report what happened. She wanted to understand why. As the night wore on, the first wave of reactions hit the internet. Fans of both actors took sides, flooding comment sections with passionate arguments. Some defended Clint, calling him a man of action who stood his ground when provoked. Others criticized him, accusing him of being too aggressive and domineering. Meanwhile, De Niro's supporters painted him as a victim of Clint's short temper, pointing out that he hadn't retaliated physically despite the provocation. The debate raged on, with hashtags like #ClintVidNiro trending across platforms. Behind the scenes, the fallout was equally intense. Lisa Carter, De Niro's assistant, spent hours fielding calls from reporters and managing the chaos. She tried to keep her boss shielded from the media frenzy, but it was impossible to ignore the growing storm. De Niro himself remained tight-lipped, refusing to comment on the incident. Instead, he retreated to his hotel suite, where Lisa found him pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. "What are we going to do?" Lisa asked cautiously, breaking the silence. "People are going to keep talking about this unless we address it." De Niro stopped mid-step and turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, a mix of frustration and weariness. "I'm not giving them anything," he said firmly. "Let them speculate all they want. I'm not dragging myself into this circus." Lisa nodded, though she wasn't convinced that staying silent was the best strategy. She knew the longer they avoided addressing the situation, the more control they would lose over the narrative. Still, she respected De Niro's decision and focused on damage control, issuing vague statements to deflect attention away from the altercation. On the other side of town, Alan Brooks sat beside Clint in a quiet corner of a dimly lit bar. They weren't there to celebrate? The mood was somber, almost reflective. Clint stared into his glass, swirling the ice cubes around without taking a sip. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the weight of the evening had settled heavily on his shoulders. "You know this is going to blow up, right?" Alan said, finally breaking the silence. "People aren't just going to let this go." Clint sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "I know," he admitted. "But what was I supposed to do? Let him stand there and insult me like that? No thanks." Alan leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. "Look, I get it. He pushed your buttons and you reacted, but now everyone's watching, waiting to see what you'll say next. If you don't handle this carefully, it could spiral out of control." Clint nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in Alan's words. He wasn't naive. He understood the power of public perception and how quickly reputations could be tarnished. Yet part of him resented the idea of having to explain himself. especially after years of letting his work speak for him. Fine, he said after a long pause. What do you suggest? Alan thought for a moment before answering. Maybe reach out to someone neutral, someone who can help tell your side of the story without making it worse. Someone like Jennifer Miller. Clint raised an eyebrow. The journalist? Why her? She's sharp, Alan replied, and she seems genuinely interested in understanding what happened, not just stirring the pot. If you give her a chance to hear you out, maybe she can write something that puts things in perspective. Clint hesitated, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, talking to a journalist meant opening himself up to scrutiny. On the other hand, staying silent might only make matters worse. Finally, he agreed, albeit reluctantly. All right, he said. Set it up, but I'm not promising anything. While Clint and Alan strategized, Jennifer continued her investigation. She reached out to Paul Dawson, a retired producer who had worked closely with both actors during their careers. Paul was hesitant at first, wary of getting caught in the middle of such a high-profile feud. But Jennifer's persistence paid off, and he eventually agreed to meet her for coffee. Over steaming cups of espresso, Paul opened up about the failed collaboration between Clint and De Niro. He described how the project, originally titled Shadows of Justice, had started with so much promise. Both men were initially enthusiastic, bringing their unique strengths to the table. Clint envisioned a raw, stripped-down narrative that focused on character and emotion. De Niro, however, pushed for layers of complexity, insisting on exploring every nuance of the story. It was like oil and water, Paul explained. Clint wanted simplicity, authenticity. De Niro craved depth, perfection. Neither was willing to compromise, and pretty soon, the whole thing fell apart. Jennifer listened intently, scribbling notes as Paul spoke. She asked about specific incidents that highlighted their differences, and he recounted several moments that illustrated just how incompatible their working styles were. One particularly memorable showdown involved a script rewrite that De Niro demanded, only for Clint to reject it outright. The tension escalated until the studio executives pulled the plug on the project altogether. By the end of their conversation, Jennifer had a clearer picture of the underlying issues. It wasn't just about artistic vision, it was about pride, ego, and the struggle for control. These were two men used to getting their way, and when neither budged, disaster followed. Back at her apartment later that night, Jennifer reviewed her notes, piecing together the fragments of the story. She realized that the altercation at the awards ceremony wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of unresolved tension. As she typed up her findings, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover. Somewhere beneath the surface lay the real reason why these two legends couldn't seem to coexist. Meanwhile, Lisa stumbled upon something that could change the narrative entirely. While organizing De Niro's files, she discovered a folder containing emails exchanged during the doomed production of Shadows of Justice. The messages revealed Clint's frustrations with De Niro's constant demands, as well as De Niro's complaints about Clint's resistance to feedback. Lisa read through them carefully, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew leaking the emails could shift public opinion in De Niro's favor, painting Clint as unreasonable and difficult to work with. But she also understood the risks involved. Releasing private correspondence could backfire spectacularly, damaging both men's reputations further. After wrestling with the decision for hours, Lisa decided to share select excerpts with a few trusted journalists, hoping to subtly influence the conversation without fully exposing the contents. As the days passed, the story continued to dominate. Headlines. Every new detail sparked fresh debates, drawing in fans and critics alike. Amidst the chaos, Jennifer received a call from Alan, confirming Clint's willingness to speak with her. She prepared meticulously for the interview, knowing it could be the key to unlocking the truth behind the feud. For now, the world waited anxiously, hungry for answers. Would Clint and De Niro reconcile, or would their clash mark the end of any possibility of future collaboration? Only time would tell. Jennifer Miller arrived at the small cafe chosen for her meeting with Clint Eastwood. She had spent the previous night preparing questions, rehearsing how to approach the conversation without seeming too pushy or biased. Her nerves were on edge. This wasn't just any interview. It was a chance to hear directly from one of Hollywood's most iconic figures about a scandal that had captivated the world. Clint walked in a few minutes later, dressed casually in jeans and a simple button-up shirt. Despite his age, he carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had defined his career. Alan Brooks followed close behind, giving Jennifer a reassuring nod before taking a seat nearby. The atmosphere was tense but not hostile, and Jennifer took a deep breath before starting. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know this must be difficult for you." Clint shrugged slightly, his expression unreadable. "Difficult? Maybe. But avoiding it won't make it go away." He paused, leaning back in his chair. "Ask your questions." Jennifer dove in carefully, starting with general topics before gradually steering the conversation toward the incident at the awards ceremony. Clint didn't dodge her inquiries, though his answers were measured and deliberate. He admitted feeling frustrated by De Niro's comments, explaining that they brought up old wounds from their failed collaboration years ago. "It wasn't just about what he said that night," Clint explained. "It was everything leading up to it, the way we couldn't see eye to eye, the constant clashes over every little detail. It wore me out." As the interview progressed, Jennifer noticed something unexpected: vulnerability beneath Clint's tough exterior. For all his bluster and no-nonsense attitude, there was a sense of regret in his tone when he spoke about the past. He acknowledged that perhaps he could have handled things differently, both during the production of Shadows of Justice and at the ceremony itself. "I'm not proud of losing my temper," he admitted, "but sometimes emotions get the better of you. I guess I let mine take over." Jennifer nodded, jotting down notes as she listened intently. This softer side of Clint was something few people had seen, and she knew it would add depth to her story. Still, she pressed further, asking whether he thought reconciliation with De Niro was possible. Clint hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the window. "I don't know," he said finally. "We're two stubborn guys who've been through a lot together and apart. Maybe someday we'll sit down and hash it out properly. But right now, I wouldn't hold my breath." While Jennifer wrapped up her interview with Clint, Lisa Carter faced her own challenges. The leaked emails had caused a stir, painting Clint in an unflattering light and reigniting debates online. Some praised De Niro for standing up to what they perceived as arrogance, while others accused Lisa of manipulating the narrative. The pressure mounted, and Lisa found herself questioning whether she'd made the right decision. De Niro, meanwhile, remained largely silent, though Lisa could tell he was deeply affected by the backlash. One evening, she joined him in his study, where he sat staring at a framed photo of himself alongside other legendary actors. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with tension. "What do you think?" Lisa asked gently. "About everything that's happening?" De Niro sighed, rubbing his temples. "I think maybe I should have kept my mouth shut that night. None of this would have happened if I hadn't pushed him." Lisa blinked in surprise. It was rare for De Niro to admit fault, especially publicly. Encouraged by his candor, she pressed on. "Do you think talking to him might help? Clearing the air?" He shook his head slowly. "Not yet. Not until things settle down. But maybe one day." The next morning, Jennifer received a call from Emily Dawson, a respected film critic known for her thoughtful analyses of Hollywood culture. Emily had read Jennifer's initial articles and wanted to discuss the situation further. Intrigued, Jennifer agreed to meet her at a quiet park bench near the city center. Emily arrived carrying a notebook filled with observations about the clash between Clint and De Niro. Unlike many commentators who focused solely on the drama, Emily saw the incident as a reflection of broader issues within the industry: ego-driven decision-making, creative differences, and the struggle to adapt to changing times. "This isn't just about two men fighting," Emily said as they sat under the shade of a tree. "It's about how the system pits artists against each other, forcing them to compete for recognition instead of fostering collaboration. Jennifer nodded, recognizing the truth in Emily's words. Over the next hour, they discussed ways to frame the story in a way that highlighted these underlying themes. Emily suggested focusing on the human element, the shared experiences and mutual respect that existed beneath the surface conflict. Inspired by the conversation, Jennifer decided to dig deeper into Clint and De Niro's history. She reached out to mutual acquaintances, including Paul Dawson, who provided additional insights into their dynamic. According to Paul, both men admired each other's talent immensely, even if they couldn't agree on how to channel it. "They're like two sides of the same coin," Paul explained. "Both passionate, both driven, but in completely different ways. That's why they clash so often." Armed with this new perspective, Jennifer revisited her notes, weaving together a narrative that balanced the personal with the professional. She wrote about the highs and lows of their careers, the pressures of fame, and the toll it took on their relationship. Her goal was to present a fair and nuanced portrayal of both men, showing them not as adversaries but as complex individuals, shaped by their unique journeys. Meanwhile, Alan Brooks grew increasingly concerned about the toll the feud was taking on Clint. Though Clint tried to remain stoic, Alan could see the strain in his eyes. One evening, over dinner, Alan broached the subject cautiously. "You can't keep carrying this weight around," he said. "You and De Niro need to find some kind of closure, for your sake, if nothing else." Clint frowned, picking at his food. "Closure sounds nice in theory, but how do you even start something like that, after all these years?" Alan leaned forward, his tone earnest. "Maybe it doesn't have to be dramatic. Just a conversation, a chance to clear the air. You don't have to become best friends overnight, but letting go of the bitterness might help." Clint didn't respond immediately, but the seed had been planted. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to consider the possibility of reconciliation, not because he owed it to anyone else, but because he owed it to himself. On the other side of town, Lisa found herself reflecting on similar thoughts. As much as she wanted to protect De Niro's reputation, she realized that perpetuating the feud served no one. Late one night, she drafted a tentative plan to facilitate communication between the two men, knowing it would require careful timing and diplomacy. For now, the world continued to speculate, fueled by every new revelation and rumor. But behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to form in the wall of animosity that had stood for so long. Whether Clint and De Niro would choose to bridge the gap remained uncertain, but the prospect of healing, even in the smallest measure, felt closer than ever. The days following Jennifer Miller's interviews with Clint Eastwood and her conversations with Emily Dawson brought a shift in the tone of the story she was crafting. It wasn't just about the clash anymore. It had evolved into something deeper, a tale of two men shaped by their ambitions, insecurities, and the relentless demands of Hollywood. As she pieced together her findings, Jennifer felt a growing sense that this feud could be more than just a scandal. It could be an opportunity for reflection, maybe even reconciliation. Emily's influence lingered in Jennifer's mind as she worked. The critics' words about the broader issues within the industry resonated deeply. She realized that focusing solely on the personal drama between Clint and De Niro would miss the bigger picture, the systemic pressures that often drove creative personalities to conflict. With this in mind, Jennifer decided to include insights from others who had witnessed similar tensions in the industry. She reached out to Mike Sullivan, a longtime friend of Clint's and a retired director known for his candid views on filmmaking. Mike agreed to meet Jennifer at his ranch, a sprawling property nestled in the hills outside Los Angeles. The setting was serene, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in the media. Over coffee on the porch, Mike shared stories about Clint and De Niro, painting them not as enemies but as kindred spirits whose differences overshadowed their shared passion for storytelling. "Both of them are perfectionists," Mike said, sipping his coffee slowly. "But they express it differently. Clint is all about instinct. He trusts his gut and moves forward. De Niro, he's methodical, almost obsessive. They're both brilliant. But when you put two forces like that together, sparks are bound to fly." Jennifer nodded, absorbing every word. Do you think they'll ever work things out? She asked cautiously. Mike chuckled softly. If anyone can, it's those two. They've got too much history to let it end like this. But it won't happen. Overnight. Pride is a funny thing. It keeps people apart longer than it should. His words stayed with Jennifer long after their conversation ended. She returned to her notes, determined to frame the story in a way that highlighted not just the conflict, but also the potential for resolution. Her article began taking shape, blending quotes from Clint, insights from industry insiders, and reflections on the nature of artistic rivalry. Yet even as she wrote, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real turning point in the story hadn't happened yet. Meanwhile, Alan Brooks grew increasingly concerned about Clint's state of mind. Though Clint tried to project calmness, Alan noticed subtle changes, longer silences, restless nights, and a distant look in his eyes whenever the topic of De Niro came up. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in Clint's living room, Alan decided to push a little harder. "You've been carrying this around for years," Alan said gently. "At some point, you've got to let it go. Holding on to anger isn't doing you any favors." Clint stared into the flames, his expression unreadable. "It's not just anger," he replied after a moment. "It's disappointment, in myself, in him, in how things turned out. I thought we could create something great together. Instead, it all fell apart." Alan leaned forward, his voice firm but compassionate. "And maybe that's why you need to talk to him. Not to fix what went wrong, but to understand it. Closure doesn't mean forgetting, it means accepting." Clint didn't respond immediately, but Alan could see the wheels turning in his head. For the first time in years, there was a flicker of openness, a willingness to consider the possibility of reaching out. Alan left that night feeling hopeful, though he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Across town, Lisa Carter wrestled with her own challenges. The fallout from the leaked emails had intensified, sparking renewed debates about the incident. While some praised De Niro for standing his ground, others accused Lisa of overstepping ethical boundaries. The pressure weighed heavily on her, and she found herself questioning whether she'd made the right decision. One afternoon, while organizing files in De Niro's office, Lisa stumbled upon an old photograph tucked inside a drawer. It showed Clint and De Niro side by side during the early stages of Shadows of Justice, smiling warmly as they discussed ideas for the film. The image struck her. It was a reminder of what could have been, a glimpse of camaraderie before everything unraveled. Lisa took the photo to De Niro later that day, showing it to him as they sat in his study. "Do you remember this?" she asked softly. De Niro studied the picture for a long moment, his expression softening. "Yeah," he said finally. "That was before everything went sideways." Lisa hesitated, unsure whether to press further. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if things had worked out differently?" He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "All the time. We were supposed to make something special. Instead..." His voice trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. Encouraged by his candor, Lisa ventured a suggestion. "Maybe it's not too late to fix things, not the movie, but whatever's still between you and Clint." De Niro shook his head, though there was less conviction in his denial than before. "I don't know how to start," he admitted. "Too much time has passed." Lisa nodded, understanding his hesitation. "Sometimes starting is the hardest part, but maybe it's worth trying." As the days turned into weeks, small gestures began paving the way for change. Inspired by Alan's advice, Clint reached out to Mike Sullivan, asking if he could act as a neutral mediator in arranging a meeting with De Niro. Mike agreed without hesitation, recognizing the importance of giving both men a safe space to talk. He suggested hosting the meeting at his ranch, far from prying eyes and media scrutiny. Lisa, meanwhile, approached De Niro cautiously, broaching the idea of sitting down with Clint. To her surprise, he didn't dismiss the suggestion outright. After some deliberation, he agreed to hear Clint out, provided the meeting remained private and informal. When news of the planned encounter reached Jennifer, she knew she had to tread carefully. Reporting on such a sensitive moment could jeopardize the fragile progress being made. Instead, she focused on completing her article, weaving together the threads of the story she had uncovered. Her final draft emphasized themes of redemption and understanding, framing the feud not as a failure, but as a testament to the complexities of human relationships. On the morning of the meeting, both Clint and Niro arrived separately at Mike's ranch, their body language tense but not hostile. Mike greeted them warmly, leading them to a quiet cabin overlooking a tranquil lake. Inside, the atmosphere was subdued, the weight of years of unresolved tension hanging heavy in the air. For several minutes, neither man spoke. They sat across from each other, avoiding direct eye contact as Mike poured cups of tea. Finally, Clint broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said simply, his voice steady but sincere, "for losing my temper that night, and for how things ended with the movie." Niro looked up, surprised by the unexpected apology. After a pause, he responded, "I'm sorry too, I pushed too hard and I know it frustrated you. Maybe we both could have handled things better." Their words weren't perfect, but they carried weight, acknowledging past mistakes and opening the door to forgiveness. As the conversation continued, they revisited memories of their early days in Hollywood, sharing laughter and reflecting on the lessons they'd learned along the way. Outside, Jennifer waited anxiously, wondering if the meeting would lead to any tangible resolution. When Mike emerged hours later, his face bore a faint smile. "They talked," he told her. "It wasn't easy, but it was a start." Though the world wouldn't know the full details of their discussion, the ripple effects were undeniable. For Clint and Niro, the meeting marked the beginning of a new chapter, not as collaborators, but as two men who had finally faced their past and chosen to move forward. The meeting at Mike Sullivan's ranch ended quietly, without fanfare or dramatic declarations. Both Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro left separately, neither man saying much to the other beyond polite farewells. Yet, for those who knew them, well, there was a subtle shift in their demeanor, a softening around the edges that hinted at progress. Alan Brooks noticed it immediately when Clint returned home that evening. "How did it go?" Alan asked cautiously, handing Clint a glass of water as he settled into his favorite armchair. Clint took a sip, his expression thoughtful. "It went okay," he said finally. "We talked. Not about everything, but enough to clear some things up." Alan raised an eyebrow, curious but careful not to push too hard. "That's good, right? Better than nothing." Clint nodded slowly. "Yeah. It felt like, I don't know, like taking a weight off my shoulders. For once, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything." His words surprised even himself. Over the years, Clint had prided himself on being self-reliant, someone who didn't need validation from others. But sitting across from De Niro that afternoon exchanging apologies and memories, he realized how much energy he'd spent holding on to resentment. Letting go wasn't easy, but it was freeing. Across town, Lisa Carter observed a similar change in De Niro. When she picked him up from Mike's ranch, he seemed unusually reflective, staring out the car window as they drove back to his hotel. At first, Lisa assumed he was processing the conversation, but when they arrived, he turned to her with an unexpected question. "Do you think people will believe us if we say we're moving past this?" he asked, his tone serious yet uncertain. Lisa hesitated before responding. "I think most people want to see you both succeed. If you show them you're willing to move forward, they'll follow your lead." De Niro nodded, though his eyes betrayed lingering doubt. He knew better than anyone how unforgiving public opinion could be. Still, Lisa's words gave him hope. Perhaps reconciliation wasn't just about repairing his relationship with Clint. It was also about proving to himself that forgiveness was possible, even after years of bitterness. As news of the private meeting spread, carefully leaked by Mike Sullivan to trusted sources, the media frenzy began to shift. Journalists who had previously focused on sensationalizing the feud now speculated about whether this marked the start of a genuine truce. Jennifer Miller, having completed her article, decided to publish it during this pivotal moment. Her piece, titled "Beyond the Feud, A Closer Look at Hollywood's Most Famous Rivalry," struck a chord with readers. In the article, Jennifer balanced personal anecdotes from her interviews with broader insights into the pressures faced by artists in the entertainment industry. She highlighted how creative differences often stemmed from passion rather than malice, framing the clash between Clint and De Niro as a testament to their dedication to their craft. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many praising her for humanizing two larger-than-life figures. For Clint and De Niro, the article served as a turning point. While neither man sought to capitalize on the renewed attention, they recognized its potential to reshape public perception. In a rare joint statement released through their representatives, they expressed regret for the spectacle caused by their altercation and reaffirmed their mutual respect for each other's work. "We may not always agree," the statement read, "but our shared love for storytelling is something we value deeply. We hope to focus on our individual projects while leaving the past behind." Though brief, the message carried weight. Fans and critics alike interpreted it as a sign of maturity, applauding both actors for prioritizing professionalism over pride. Some skeptics remained unconvinced, questioning whether the reconciliation was genuine or merely a PR strategy. But for those closest to Clint and De Niro, the sincerity behind their words was undeniable. Mike Sullivan played a crucial role in navigating the aftermath of the meeting. As someone trusted by both men, he acted as a bridge, ensuring communication remained open despite occasional awkwardness. One afternoon, he arranged a casual lunch at a quiet restaurant, inviting Clint and De Niro to join him under the guise of catching up. The gathering wasn't formal or structured. It was simply an opportunity for them to interact naturally, away from the pressure of expectations. Over plates of steak and salad, the conversation flowed more easily than either man anticipated. They reminisced about old colleagues, joked about embarrassing moments on set, and even discussed current films they admired. Though they avoided delving too deeply into their past disagreements, the underlying tension continued to fade. At one point, Clint leaned back in his chair, studying De Niro with a faint smile. "You know," he said, "if we hadn't clashed so much back then, maybe we wouldn't have pushed each other to do better." De Niro chuckled, shaking his head. "Or maybe we would have driven each other insane." Their laughter broke the ice further, cementing a fragile but growing sense of camaraderie. By the end of the meal, they exchanged phone numbers, a small gesture, but one that symbolized a willingness to stay connected. Jennifer followed up on her initial article with a second piece focusing on the themes of forgiveness and redemption. Drawing inspiration from Emily Dawson's earlier commentary, she emphasized how conflicts like these reflected universal struggles within the industry and beyond. Her writing resonated with readers, earning praise for its empathy and insight. Meanwhile, Alan and Lisa worked behind the scenes to manage the ongoing narrative. Alan encouraged Clint to embrace the positive momentum, suggesting he use his platform to advocate for collaboration over competition. Lisa, on the other hand, helped De Niro navigate lingering criticisms, reminding him that healing took time. One evening, as Clint sat alone on his porch watching the sunset, he reflected on how far he'd come. The anger that once consumed him had given way to acceptance, not just of De Niro but of himself. He realized that letting go of grudges wasn't a sign of weakness. It was an act of strength. De Niro experienced a similar epiphany while reviewing scripts for an upcoming project. Flipping through pages filled with complex characters and emotional depth, he found himself appreciating the nuances of storytelling in a way he hadn't before. Perhaps, he thought, this newfound clarity came from confronting his own flaws and learning to forgive. As weeks turned into months, the world moved on, shifting its focus to new scandals and controversies. But for Clint and De Niro, the impact of their reconciliation lingered. They didn't become close friends overnight, nor did they plan to collaborate anytime soon. What mattered was that they had taken the first step toward understanding, and that was enough. Jennifer wrapped up her coverage with a final article summarizing the journey from conflict to resolution. In it, she wrote about the importance of humility and the power of second chances. Her concluding paragraph captured the essence of the story. In a world obsessed with perfection, Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro remind us that greatness isn't about never making mistakes. It's about owning those mistakes, learning from them, and choosing to grow. Theirs is a tale not of rivalry but of redemption, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. The article marked the end of Jennifer's involvement in the saga, but its legacy lived on. For Clint and De Niro, the experience became a defining chapter in their lives, one they would carry with them long after the headlines faded. Months passed since the meeting at Mike Sullivan's ranch, and life for Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro settled into a quieter rhythm. The media storm that had once dominated headlines gradually subsided, replaced by newer stories and scandals. Yet the ripple effects of their reconciliation lingered, not just in Hollywood but in the hearts of those who admired them. Clint returned to his work with renewed focus. He spent long hours on set directing a new film, pouring his energy into every detail. Though he rarely spoke about his experience with De Niro, those close to him noticed a change. His interactions with cast and crew were warmer, less rigid than before. Alan Brooks often caught glimpses of this softer side during breaks between takes. "You seem different lately," Alan remarked one afternoon as they sat together reviewing dailies. "More relaxed." Clint shrugged, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just tired of carrying around old baggage." Alan chuckled, knowing exactly what Clint meant. "Well, whatever it is, it suits you." For Clint, the shift wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. But inside he felt lighter, as though a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying had finally lifted. Reflecting on his conversation with De Niro, he understood now that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of anger. It was about reclaiming peace. He found himself more willing to listen, to compromise when necessary, and to appreciate the collaborative spirit that filmmaking demanded. Across town, De Niro immersed himself in preparing for his next role. Known for his meticulous approach, he spent weeks researching and rehearsing, diving deep into the character's psyche. Yet there was something different about his process this time, a sense of perspective that hadn't been there before. Lisa Carter observed this change during their daily meetings. "You're not pushing yourself as hard as usual," she noted cautiously, unsure if her observation would be met with annoyance. De Niro glanced up from his script, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe I don't need to," he replied after a moment. "Sometimes perfection isn't the goal. Sometimes it's about telling the truth, about the story, about yourself." His words surprised Lisa. Over the years, she had grown, accustomed to De Niro's relentless pursuit of excellence, often at the expense of his own well-being. Hearing him speak so candidly about balance and authenticity was refreshing and hopeful. The two men didn't see each other regularly after their initial meetings, but they stayed in touch through occasional phone calls and text messages. Their conversations were brief and lighthearted, touching on everything from sports to industry gossip. Neither man brought up the past unless prompted, preferring instead to focus on the present. It was a small but significant step toward rebuilding trust. Jennifer Miller continued to follow their progress from afar, piecing together updates for her final article. She reached out to both Clint and De Niro, asking if they'd be open to sharing reflections on how the experience had impacted them. To her surprise, both agreed, albeit reluctantly. In a rare interview, Clint spoke candidly about the lessons he'd learned. "I used to think holding on to anger made me stronger," he admitted. "But it doesn't. Letting go does. That doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward." De Niro echoed similar sentiments when Jennifer spoke with him. "We all make mistakes," he said simply. "What matters is whether we learn from them." For me, this whole thing was a reminder that pride can blind you if you let it. Their openness resonated with readers, many of whom saw parallels between the actor's journey and their own struggles with conflict and forgiveness. Jennifer's final article became one of her most celebrated pieces, praised for its honesty and depth. Critics hailed it as a masterclass in storytelling, capturing the humanity behind the headlines. As the year drew to a close, Clint and De Niro crossed paths again at a charity gala honoring veterans. Both men were invited as guests of honor, and though they arrived separately, they ended up seated near each other at the event. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with laughter and heartfelt speeches. During a break in the program, Clint leaned over to De Niro, gesturing toward the stage where a young veteran was sharing his story. "You know," Clint said quietly, "this is why we do what we do. Stories matter." De Niro nodded, his gaze fixed on the speaker. "They really do," he agreed. "And sometimes they remind us of what's important. Their exchange might have gone unnoticed by others. But for Jennifer, who happened to be covering the event, it was a poignant moment. Watching the two legends sit side by side, united by a shared purpose, she couldn't help but feel a sense of closure, not just for them, but for everyone who had followed their journey. After the gala, Clint and De Niro lingered outside, chatting casually under the stars. They talked about upcoming projects, mutual acquaintances, and even joked about their infamous clash. There was no trace of bitterness in their voices, only camaraderie. "I never thought we'd end up here," De Niro said with a wry smile. "Talking like normal people." Clint chuckled, lighting a cigar. "Me neither. But hey, stranger things have happened." They parted ways shortly afterward, shaking hands firmly before heading in opposite directions. Though the encounter was fleeting, it symbolized something profound. A bridge rebuilt, a chapter closed. Back at her apartment, Jennifer typed the final lines of her article, reflecting on everything she had witnessed. Her conclusion captured the essence of the story. Clint Eastwood and Robert De Niro are proof that even the strongest personalities can find common ground. Their feud may have captivated the world, but their reconciliation reminds us of something greater: the power of humility, understanding, and forgiveness. In an industry driven by ambition and ego, they chose to rise above, proving that true greatness lies not in perfection, but in growth. When the article went live, it sparked widespread acclaim. Readers flooded social media with messages of gratitude, thanking Jennifer for reminding them of the importance of second chances. For Clint and De Niro, the response was humbling. They hadn't sought recognition for their efforts, but seeing the impact of their decision to reconcile reinforced their belief in the value of healing. In the months that followed, both men continued to thrive in their respective careers. Clint released his latest film to critical acclaim, while De Niro earned praise for his performance in a gritty drama. Though their paths rarely crossed, they remained connected by a bond forged through adversity. One quiet evening, Clint found himself flipping through channels late at night. He stopped on a classic film starring De Niro, watching intently as the actor delivered a powerful monologue. For the first time in years, Clint nodded in approval, appreciating the artistry without reservation. Miles away, De Niro sat in his study, leafing through a script Clint had directed years earlier. As he read, a faint smile crossed his face, a silent acknowledgement of the talent and vision that had once divided them, but now inspired mutual respect. Though their relationship would never be defined by collaboration or friendship, it had evolved into something equally meaningful, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Clint and De Niro had proven that even the fiercest rivals could find peace, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it as part of their shared story. And so the tale of their feud came to an end, not with fireworks or fanfare, but with quiet reflection and acceptance. It was a reminder that life, much like cinema, is shaped not by singular moments but by the connections we forge along the way.